Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Live from the Ranch. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where in the world you're joining us from. We are coming to you live on YouTube and as well as on Facebook. And this is Live from the Ranch. And my co-host this month, just like every month, is Juliana DeWillems with JW Dog Training and Behavior in the Washington, D.C. area. Juliana, are you out there somewhere? There you are. How you doing today?
Hi, I'm great, Ken. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I see a little tail coming up in front of you there. Is that one of your little kittens?
This is one of my kittens that we talked about, I think, 2 broadcasts ago, where they were teeny tiny and fresh out of the woods, feral. And now they're extremely social to the point where, they like being in my personal space when I'm working, which I really love. But yes, sorry for that little distraction.
No, it's great. I mean, if you follow Juliana on Instagram, you see occasional glimpses into all the great work that you've done into acclimating them and desensitizing them. And so it's great to see that they're doing well. And I think the
Thank
last time we
you.
talked about them a couple of months ago, there was this uncertainty as to whether you were going to keep them. But I don't think that's an uncertainty anymore, is it?
Not at all. They are not going anywhere. I was a little worried about my allergies, but it turns out the cat distribution system wanted me to have them and has not cured, but my allergies are doing way better than expected. So, and we are super attached. So they are definitely part of the family now. I'm a first-time cat mother, so I'm learning a
Oh, that's
lot.
good. Well, that's good. Maybe we'll have an episode about cat behavior at some point. But speaking of, one of the things we're going to talk about today is our guest is going to be Camilla Chu, and we're going to talk a little bit about public speaking and the benefits of learning more about public speaking. When I think about public speaking, I think about big events like Clicker Expo, of which you and I are both going to be a part of. When you do big events like that, or when you teach, even if it's not a big event, do you have public speaking fears or anxieties, or are you one of those people who goes, doesn't bother me a bit? I get up in front of all those people and I just chat away. What's your feeling about them?
I definitely get nervous, although under some conditions it feels much easier. So for example, virtually, my behavior feels very fluent, and on smaller scale in person, my behavior feels very fluent because I did that for years before COVID hit. But I have not yet tried on the kind of grand scale of Clicker Expo. So we'll see. I would predict that yes, I'll have some nerves.
So you'll be rejoining us again for the virtual expo, but you're also coming for the
Mhm.
first time as a speaker to the in-person expo. So that will always be a big thing. For me, public speaking has never come easy, but I do love Clicker Expo. And so I just want to remind everybody that if you're an animal training professional or just an animal training enthusiast, you won't want to miss our Clicker Expo conferences. These events are just such a great way to improve your skills, stay up to date on the latest techniques, and learn from some of the most respected positive reinforcement teachers and trainers in the world. As Juliana and I just talked about, you can join us for Clicker Expo Live, which is our virtual conference, January 26th, 27th, and 28th. And you can join us for Clicker Expo Portland, which will be our in-person conference next year. That's April 5th, 6th, and 7th, featuring 2 completely different programs, meaning that you could attend both of them and get completely different experiences. Both feature opportunities to participate with your dog in real time, and our early bird spots are still available. They're going quickly, so don't miss your chance to save up to $50. You can learn more about Clicker Expo at clickerexpo.clickertraining.com. And having said all of that, I would love to introduce our very first guest, or our only guest this month, because we're going to talk about some fun things. Her name is Camilla Chu, and she has a lifelong passion for animals and has shared her journey as a dedicated advocate and educator. Professionally, she found herself a community of amazing positive reinforcement trainers when she took her puppy to class. She started as a volunteer, and Camilla embraced every opportunity to immerse herself in the realm of animal training. Her commitment led her to pursue formal education and certification. Ultimately, she became a proud graduate of the Karen Pryor Academy, and Camilla continually prioritizes expanding her knowledge, recognizing the importance of ongoing learning in her field. And in addition to her KPA certified training partner certification, she's also Tag Teach Level 1 certified. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in honors in biology and an ARCT in speech arts. And complementing her extensive animal training background, Camilla has been a teacher for over 12 years, teaching human children ages 5 to 18, adults, and animal-human teams in communication and behavior. She's been working to apply the principles of learning and behavior that she's come to learn from KPA and Tag Teach to the art of public speaking, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. And I'm so pleased, Camilla, that you could join us today. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So before we dive into public speaking, tell us a little bit more about your background. You are an animal trainer. Where did that interest come from? When did it start? Since a really young age, or did it come later in life?
For animals, it was probably from day one. I mean, I was really lucky. I had a mom who also loved animals. Our house was filled with, we had budgies, we had hamsters, we had rabbits, we had dogs. Eventually, I got into horseback riding as well. So there's been a lot of animals, and I didn't realize that not everyone had a house filled with animals like I did.
Well, I grew up around animals as well, but I was on a working ranch, and very little did we ever talk about training. And so training was something that while I was always interested in animals, I didn't really become interested in training until I became probably a high school student somewhere in there. Where did your interest in training come from?
My interest in training came from my first dog, the family dog that we kept, that was, you want to teach them all these tricks, and that was probably where the first part of my training interest came in. And then I had a stint as a bit of a groomer, and I realized, and as a dog walker, and I realized that the thing that bothered me the most about these professions, I couldn't do anything to change the dog's behavior on the grooming table or on a walk. And so that's what actually led me to behavior, because I was so frustrated that, these dogs were pulling, and I wasn't allowed to do anything about it, or I didn't know how to do anything about it. So, and then the rest is history. So
Well, that's good. That's really great. And do you teach classes on a regular basis about dog training? Is that something that you do on a regular basis?
I do. I teach at a facility that's wonderful locally here, and I teach puppy classes and regular adolescent classes as well. Those are probably my specialties. I just love puppies. They're so fun to work with, and it's so interesting to see them come through. So we do group classes, we do orientation. It's kind of like a rolling start. So whenever the orientation, you can start in classes, and I do that usually every Saturday, and then I take some private clients as well.
That's great. And where do you do all of that? You're in Canada, right?
Yes, I'm in Calgary, Alberta, and the facility I work at is It Happens.
Oh, excellent. Well, good. Well, I know we're going to talk about public speaking. I'm curious as to where your interest in public speaking came from, and when did that start for you?
Absolutely. So I love story because I am not what you would imagine a public speaker came from. I was not the super adventurous, talkative kid. I was the super shy kid who never wanted to put their hand up for a question, to answer a question, or I just wanted to be invisible. And my mom was like, this will not do. So she put me into speech arts classes as a 6-year-old. And then I got into private instruction a year or two after that, after class, at the local university, and I graduated high school alongside of speech arts. My mother used it as a bargaining chip. So if I wanted horse riding lessons, I had to stay in speech arts. If I wanted swim lessons, I had to stay in speech arts. And the horses were probably the biggest bargaining chip she had. So I graduated with it, and I would say it's a very sneaky teaching subject, because I didn't realize until after I graduated that I was quite at ease in front of people and at ease in speaking to other people. So people would get so nervous that they would throw up before a
Yeah.
presentation in class, and I would be so surprised and stunned. I mean, I get nervous, and the secret is that nerves are good.
Yeah.
Everyone gets nervous before a presentation. I always tell my students that that's a good thing. It means that you care about the presentation. So that's a good thing going into a presentation. It's just a matter of some practice, some skills that you can learn, and practice on your own, or practice in classes, group settings, that really give you the foundation that once you start speaking, you can go ahead and run away with it. So I've spoken
No.
in front of at conferences like 200 people to So classes and individuals, I think all of it is public speaking, whether you're talking to one person or 100.
Now that's an interesting perspective. I mean, I certainly totally I can relate to the fear that you had of public speaking as a child. I can't relate to the mother pushing me out that direction. I didn't have that happen to me. But as you heard Juliana and I talking about, boy, getting in front of a group of people, I was terrified of that as a kid in school. I I even hated it when people said, let's just go around one at a time and just tell us who you are and where you're from. And that's just my name and where I live. But as we would go around the room, I was going, oh my God, it's coming. I'm going to be next. Oh my God, I gotta say my name. Where am I from? What am I going to say? And it's like that. It wasn't that hard to do, but it truly petrified me. And I know that people who've seen me standing up in front of a Clicker Expo audience on a regular basis and hopefully looking relaxed and comfortable at it, that did not come easily nor naturally for me. So that's why I think this topic is really interesting. And I think for a lot of our viewers, they may even wonder, well, that's fine and good. If I need to get up and teach a class or get up in front of a bunch of people, this is going to be valuable information for me. But you mentioned that you think of public speaking, even when you're talking to one person, you feel that public speaking can really benefit trainers, not just because they're going to be teaching a class, but in other ways. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so when I went to university, I got a biology degree. So I didn't really think about it. But coming back, I started teaching, just co-teaching with some other speech arts and stuff. And I realized that it doesn't matter whether or not you are speaking to one person, or if you are speaking to three people in a meeting, or five people, or 10 people, 100 people. It's the same process of putting your ideas and organizing your thoughts together and being able to present them and express them a way that is understood and a way that is clear. So it doesn't really matter if you're talking to one person, like one client, or just having a conversation. And to be perfectly honest, Ken, I think that um, all conversations you have are stories or they're speeches. If you think of someone asking, "How was your day today?" You might tell them, "Oh, it was great. I went and I did, I had a great workout this morning, and then I went and had a coffee at Starbucks, and then I went to work and I worked on 3 projects." And that's a chronological speech, right?
Right.
Um, and if they ask a little bit more, like, "Oh, did you have a scary incident today?" "Oh, yes, I saw this car and it almost sideswiped me as I was driving." But it was steady on the wheel, and then it was totally fine, and we forgot about it, like, after ten seconds after that. And that to me is a story, right? There was a problem, there was some excitement in there, and there's still a conclusion, and there's still a beginning to it. So to me, everything is a story or a speech, whether you organize it chronologically, whether you organize it is information, or you're trying to persuade someone, or it's a story that because that's how we relate to each other as humans. We relate
Sure.
with stories.
So I definitely see the value in that because I often think about, if you're working as a consultant or as a dog trainer and you just have a client, you're just meeting with a family or one person from a family and they're wanting you, I have a problem. Can I have help with my dog? You have to be able to articulate your thinking, your ideas, your story with that individual client. And so that's an interesting way to look at it. Do you have many people that come to you or that show interest in the idea of public speaking who don't really have goals of being a public speaker, but just want to be better at talking one-on-one with a client or being comfortable in a staff meeting with a group of 3 or 4 people? It seems to me there would be a lot of value in that, and do people, but I'm wondering if people often recognize that value.
For sure. I do get a bulk of people who are on the shyer side. So I do have some clients who they just want to be able to speak up in their work meetings of 3 to 5 people. And they just find themselves in so much fear that they can't quite jump in at the right moment, or they they feel like they've missed their moment, and then they're stuck in the moment of when can I speak up, or I have something to add to this conversation, and they don't know how to. or they want practice having the confidence to. And
Yeah.
that's what public speaking in practice, public speaking really is all about. It's about practicing thoughts and being able to express what comes up.
I think sometimes the fear of speaking in public or in expressing your ideas in a staff meeting are is the fear that I may not really have anything that people are going to be interested in, or my ideas aren't really going to be good enough. I'm afraid to bring them up because they may ridicule me for coming up with a stupid idea. How do you how do you coach people to get over that fear of maybe my ideas just aren't good enough and maybe aren't they I don't want to say them because people are going to ridicule me.
I don't attack that head on. I kind of take a more round route as far as I want people to develop confidence in things that they are going to find easy. So that's where our successive approximations will come. As far as I want people to find our exercises, I put them through easy and like, oh yeah, that I can totally do that. So they don't have any nervousness when it comes to practicing it or doing it. And then I guide them a little bit and kind of nudge them towards being able to do more complicated things, more complex thoughts or ideas or speeches or patterns. And then just like anything at KPA, we take the small steps, the most successful step, we work our way up to more complicated behaviors, and then it clicks for them. And it kind of comes to play where it's just like now that they have the confidence and the know-how, they're not as worried about the rest of it. They're
Right.
trying
No,
to
I really applaud your approach to answering that question because when I talked about it in terms of confidence, there's a lot of psychological issues wrapped up in that. And the fact that you said that you don't hit that head on, you take this other approach, you teach what you know best and help them get the confidence to do that. And I like the fact that you mentioned the DTP, which is the Dog Trainer Professional Program that we have at KPA. Did you feel that going through that program that your skills at public speaking, even though you weren't ever really needing to get up in front of a huge group of people, were those skills helpful for you in going through the program?
Yes, I would say that that wasn't something that I ever really thought of until one of my colleagues brought it up. Um, the ability to just explain something or speak about something and even come at it from different angles has just been something that I've developed over time and a skill that I'm recognizing now that I developed in the past. And even in the program, we still had to talk to each other. We still had to share amongst the group, and we even had to teach classes, right,
Right.
for practice and for evaluation. So there was always the bit of nervousness there too. But that wasn't something. That's definitely something I brought my skills from my other path um, into, and I felt like it just fits so perfectly.
Well, that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk about, and we're going to take a break. But before we do, what I'll talk about is I really want to see if you can talk me through the small approximations that you might use to teach someone to be comfortable speaking in front of other people. But I'm going to take the fact that we were just talking about the Dog Trainer Professional Program to take just a quick break and tell everybody just a little bit about our Dog Trainer Professional Program. So at Karen Pryor Academy, we do take what I think is a very innovative approach to developing and supporting outstanding positive reinforcement trainers. We combine online learning with hands-on coaching from some of the most experienced teachers in the field. And that's the program that Camilla was just talking about that she's gone through herself. So if you are interested in becoming a certified professional dog trainer, we encourage you to check out more than 20 upcoming locations. You see some of them on the screen right there: Dallas, Des Moines, Detroit, Los Angeles, Montreal, Quebec, Oviedo, Florida, and many, many others. And if you're interested in becoming certified and want to find out about those, you can apply for our Dog Trainer Professional Program today, or you can just learn more about our introductory dog trainer courses at KarenPryorAcademy.com. I certainly hope you to take us up on looking up some of those things and finding out more about what being a dog trainer professional is all about. But Camilla, what I would love to do is one of the things that we do teach in the Dog Trainer Professional Program is when teaching animals, we teach them in small steps. And I think that one of the things that intrigued me as you and I talked about you being on the broadcast is I loved the approach that you take to doing it in really small steps, because that's not how I learned to public speak. It was like, here's what you got to talk about, get up and do it. And it was like, oh my goodness, I got to tackle this entire thing all at once. And I didn't really understand how to break it down. Now, I have actually taught people a little bit about public speaking myself and have learned to break it down into small steps, but it wasn't quite the approach that you described. And I thought, well, maybe we could show people, if I'm really uncertain about how to start public speaking, how would you just take me through the process over the next 15 minutes? Give me a little lesson, show me how to do it, give me some examples. I'd love to illustrate it for our viewers today.
Absolutely. So one of the exercises I love to do, and all of my students do it, we actually pull random, either I'll give a picture or I'll give them a sentence, or I might give them a thought or a word. So I've actually picked already, I have an apple that has lots of little topics, and I've picked the word pumpkin since it's kind of we're entering fall season. So we're going
Okay.
to work with the word pumpkin today. And all I want you to do first is to tell me 3 things about a pumpkin. Any 3 things at all.
Okay, a pumpkin. I associate pumpkin with Halloween. I think of orange when I think of pumpkins, and they're pretty big. They're in my estimation, they're bigger than a soccer ball. They're kind of like large. At least the pumpkins that I usually see are decent size. Those are
That's
pumpkins.
fantastic. So that's check mark number 1 for the first exercise. I just wanted any 3 things, and I will take any 3 things about pumpkins. So that was wonderful. Now, if we go into, say, it's like day 2, our next iteration of this exercise, with those 3 things about pumpkins, you actually already started giving me some details about, you said pumpkins were large, and you said that pumpkins, you imagined to be bigger than a soccer ball. Um, can you give me some examples of a comparison for the color orange of pumpkins, or
A comparison of the color orange. Well, it's interesting because our KPA colors are purple and gold. If you look at the screen right now, there is some purple, and that color that's there is not exactly orange, but I've seen pumpkins that are sort of that color. And so that might be a comparison of something that I can think of. I can't right now think of many other things that are orange, but I'm sure there are others.
that's great. I just asked for one, so that was perfect.
Okay.
Now, so let's go back to that first detail. You mentioned that pumpkins bring about the thought of Halloween.
Mhm.
Can you give me an example of something from Halloween that is specifically associated with pumpkins, or something that details that associates? How does that draw that association for me?
Well, I guess a reason I think of pumpkins is because so often people use them and carve them out and make jack-o'-lanterns in different faces, sometimes friendly and sometimes scary, but that's what I think about, is that use of them.
For sure, exactly. Yeah. And so if we think about these 3 things, now I want to back up a little bit. So if we have Halloween, pumpkins are associated with Halloween as a holiday for decor. We have pumpkins being orange and various colors of shades of orange. And the third example you had was the size of the pumpkin. So if we were to give this one overarching topic, what would that be? Like, can you think of something that would fit all 3 of these things? And you don't have to go specific, you can go general.
I'm not sure what you mean. You mean like, um,
Information about pumpkins, how about that?
okay.
Would it fit under that title?
Yeah. Oh, I see. That's the summary. I see. Information about pumpkins. Yeah. Yeah. Or um, use of pumpkins for Halloween, or
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So use of pumpkins for Halloween, that's great because it's even more specific than just information about pumpkins, but both would work really well. So if we take Ken, you've made a speech right there.
How so?
You've made a speech about the use of pumpkins, specifically, possibly in decor. So you could talk about how the color of pumpkins, there's different colors of pumpkins being used. It's often used in Halloween for decor. We can carve them, or with the various shades of orange. And then we've also, if we have different sizes of pumpkins, that's something to consider in the decor of using pumpkins for Halloween and for decoration. So if we take that, now you've made a whole speech, we're going to make another one.
Okay.
So if I think of speeches, I classify the speeches under three different categories. So there's
Okay.
speeches to inform, speeches to persuade, and speeches to entertain. So to inform is kind of what we've just done. We've given some facts, we've given some information, some examples, or some details. To persuade means that you're going to try and convince me of something.
Okay.
Okay. And then to entertain, that's like your speeches at ceremonies or weddings or as a host,
Okay.
for example. Okay. So we've just done a speech to inform. Do you want to do another speech to inform, or would you like to do a speech to persuade?
Um, let's do another one to inform. I feel like I'm more prepared for that.
Okay. So would you like an adjacent topic, or would you like a brand new topic to start again?
You suggest the one that you think would best illustrate your point.
Okay. Well, we've done decor for pumpkins. So why don't we talk about the fall season, and what are three other things you can tell me about the fall season?
Oh well, the fall season is when the weather starts to change. It's when non-evergreen trees. I live in Washington State, so we have plenty of evergreen trees, but we have plenty of other types of trees where the color of the leaves begins to change. And I live in a very rural area, and so when I drive through the area, I often see lots and lots of pumpkin patches or pumpkin gardens, big rows of pumpkins, and oh gosh, it's coming up on Halloween time or Thanksgiving time, and those are the things that I think about.
Very cool. So that's perfect. So if we take that as, this is what would the overarching piece be for that?
Um, things that I notice about fall, or what I see in our area when fall arrives.
Perfect. Okay, so that's perfect for our topic there. So now if we go back and look at some examples, can you tell me? You gave me a great example with, you're driving down the road and you see all these pumpkin patches, and the weather is changing and the leaves are falling. Is there a story you can tell me that you can associate with any of these elements, or um, about fall, about the changing of the leaves, or the colors, or the temperature?
Um, I think of I can think of a story about pumpkins. In particular, every year, because of I've recently become, in the last couple of years, become much more active on Instagram. I always find myself around Halloween looking for opportunities to get pictures of my animals with something that represents Halloween, and often it includes pumpkins. In fact, for the first time this year, we are growing our own pumpkin patch. We have our own pumpkins that are just now starting. We have the first one that just turned orange. A bunch of them are green right now, but they're just coming into season, and I think it'll be another month maybe before we'll start to really see the big orange pumpkins come out. But we're growing them ourselves because I like using them. I like that. Another funny story is last year for Halloween, I was I always talk to people about training your dogs and getting them comfortable with changing surroundings. And I happened to have a huge pumpkin that was carved as a jack-o'-lantern. And it was so big that I was able to put it on my head. And I used it to train my dogs as an example of how I changed the environment for the dogs by working them with this big pumpkin head on.
Excellent. So it's great that you gave me two stories, because now I'm going to slot them into an official speech format. So if we
Okay.
think of the format of a speech, we have an introduction, we have a call to either the topic, the main topic, and then we have the details in the middle, and then we have a conclusion.
Okay.
So everyone likes to try and start at the beginning. They try to like to jump into the introduction. And unfortunately, that's probably one of the most difficult things to jump into, is the introduction or the conclusion. So I always start people with the middle, the meat of what's
Okay.
going on. So that's where those three things come from. So your temperature change, the leaves falling, That's all the stuff that's going to be in the middle of our little speech here. So now that you've given me two stories, I actually am going to take the first story you gave me and put it at the top. So that's your introduction. That's the way you're going to pull your audience into your speech. You're going to give something that's relatable, that relates you to this topic, as well as something that is more interesting as far as gets their attention, right? At the end of your introduction, you might add, your topic of these are some things I noticed about fall. You go into your things you noticed about fall, and at the very end, if you're going to have a call to action or you're going to have some kind of conclusion, I like to end with a story because it makes it a little more relatable as well. And then it's perfect because your story about using a pumpkin head as part of training would open very well into making people remember that you're associated with training and that that might lead on to something else too. So this might even be like a great little mini speech before a bigger presentation about generalization or about different ways to train. And so there you go. You've made two speeches to inform, and you could actually easily tweak. I think the second one there into a speech to persuade.
So I think the thing that trips me up is that it's really easy for me to answer your questions. Tell me a story. Tell me what I think of when I think of fall. But as soon as you say, now it's a speech. Now tell me, put it all together, I sort of freeze up and go, oh my goodness, everybody's watching me trying to tell a story. How do I get that out of my head and just relax and do what you're suggesting, which is turn it into just an you know, I've even forgot what it was. I'm talking about the middle part, the
Three
meat of the
things.
story. So three things.
Yeah, so I would just practice. So practice random. You can go online and find tons of word generators. You could make your own little word generation thing. And I would, as even though you might be practicing for teaching a dog training class, I would
Right.
actually stay away from any dog training topics for the start. I would just go with things that are neutral. I would go for things like cups, mugs, pens,
Right.
lasagna, um, whatever you kind of are inspired by around your home or about that week. And I would just, can you say three things about them? And then after that, I might say five, just to give yourself some options, right? It's nice if you were making a speech for a presentation, you might want to brainstorm. So having five options and picking three of those five gives you more options to pick from at the end. So I would say start with three and then make five and practice that until you're fluent.
Gotcha.
Um,
That makes
and
sense.
then once you've got that, then it's about the finesse of just putting all those pieces together and then remembering all of that, right?
Right.
That's probably the most difficult part is remembering, like, this is what you've now put together. Can you go through it at one go? And we're doing this all impromptu, right? We're
Right.
not writing anything down.
Right.
And so it's a little harder for us to remember. But so if I was,
You know what I think one of the other obstacles for me is I got to make this entertaining. I got to make it so that people enjoy it. And actually, if I'm practicing a speech in this way, my goal isn't necessarily to make it entertaining. It can be, but it is really is just about just share those three things in this way, right? That's what I have to think about, is not worry about structuring it in a way that there's a punchline or that there's some big reveal or anything like that. It's just, here's these three things. And so I want to tell you a little bit about pumpkins. Probably the most important thing to tell you is that they're orange. I've got my own pumpkin patch this year, which I'm going to use to pose animal pictures in. And one of the most interesting things about pumpkins is that I used one last year on my head as a distraction for my dogs, and it ended up being one of the most what's the word, liked posts that I had used that year because of the fact that it was so funny. Everybody wanted to call me Pumpkinhead. But either way, there, I just did it. I just gave you all of those things in a story. Okay,
there you
that
go.
worked. I just had to get out of my head that I was trying to make it an entertaining speech. It's just, I'm going to tell you these three things.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to focus on the small steps first. And then once you get the fluency of it, then, time to raise criteria.
And so then what happens next? So you've have me coming up with 3 or 5 ideas, and you had me talk about pumpkins, and you had me talk about the fall. Where do we go next?
Let's try persuasive. So,
Okay.
so I'm gonna give you a question, and I want you to tell me. So, do you prefer chocolate or candy?
I like chocolate. I will say chocolate. I prefer
Okay.
chocolate.
Okay. So can you tell me one reason why you like chocolate more than candy?
Well, when I think of candy, I think candy can be of many different kinds. And one of the kinds of candy I see a lot of people is those chewy, fruity things. And I like the flavor of fruit, but I don't like chewy candy. And so that's why I prefer chocolate, because chocolate I can bite into and I enjoy the flavor of it. I particularly like milk chocolate because it's sweet and it's got a lot of flavor. I just like the way it tastes.
Ken, you've already got like most of a speech right there. You told me you told me why you like chocolate. So you told me why you don't like candy, one
Mhm.
thing, right? You've told me why you do like chocolate, so the texture and the mouth feel. And then you've also told me about the specific kind of chocolate that you would prefer. So there's those three things already. I was just going to ask you for one, but you gave me three. So that's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. All
And
right. So
so, yeah, so I like to start with more interesting or easy to find opinion questions for persuasive speeches, like chocolate
right,
or candy, because I find most people have a preference. Or if they say none, then you can go none as well. Why do you not like chocolate or candy?
right, right.
Another fun one would be like, is a hot dog a sandwich? So, in your opinion, Ken, is a hot dog a sandwich?
I don't usually think of it as a sandwich, but I think if I was listing it under sandwiches on a menu, I would call it a sandwich. Yes.
Okay, so why?
I think because I think of a sandwich as being meat or protein or something, the main thing that you want to eat between two pieces of bread. And since a hot dog is usually bread is usually sliced and you put the hot dog in between it, I think I would categorize it as a sandwich. I could see someone arguing with me about that point, but I would call it a sandwich.
Okay, perfect. So now, just to play devil's advocate, we're going to go to the other side of it and tell me why a hot dog might not be a sandwich.
Um, it might not be a sandwich because usually you think of a sandwich as being two pieces of bread with the stuff in between. And usually a hot dog is sliced, but it isn't usually separated. In fact, it's a very hard thing to eat if your bun splits completely in half and you can't keep all the condiments in your hot dog. Uh, it isn't doesn't meet that criteria if you think of a sandwich as being two pieces of meat, I mean, two pieces of bread with your stuff in the middle. Uh, that might be why it might not be considered a sandwich. Plus, it has a very specific name. And I've even seen people like a hamburger. People don't think of it as a sandwich because it has its own name. It's called a hamburger. It's not a sandwich, but I think it is a sandwich. But
Yes. Yeah. So we've got three speeches under persuasion already,
so is
right?
the idea of persuasion is to convince people of why I like chocolate as opposed to candy, or convince people of why a hot dog is or isn't a sandwich? That's what you mean by persuasion.
So persuasive speech is simply to explain or be able to defend your opinion on one side of a question,
I see.
right?
Yeah.
So you've done it both ways for both sides of the same question, and you've done one completely separate from it. And so I think, look at that. You've done like what, five, six speeches in this short time already?
Wow, I'm a regular speechwriter.
Exactly. There you go.
So I get what you're doing. So you really are you're coaching students. You're coaching me to say just take a random topic. I got a little worried when you said pumpkin because I thought I don't think I know a lot about pumpkins. But really you made it easy because you just said give me three things about pumpkins. And then we talked about fall, and then we went to the random topic of candy and sandwiches. And the reality is that I can easily answer questions about any of those things, at least my perspective on them. And that's what writing a speech or getting ready to talk is really about, right?
Yes, I would say that what we're doing right now is I would consider it improvised speaking, right? Impromptu speaking. So it's just the ability to organize some thoughts very quickly and be able to kind of fly by the seat of your pants. And if I really think about it, when you are teaching a topic or a subject like dog training,
Right.
um, you don't necessarily know. You have to work with the learners in front of you. So you don't
Right.
know, you can't necessarily give them these are the same steps. You might not be able to give everyone the exact same steps. So the ability to fly by the seat of your pants a little bit is very useful, and being able to practice how to express yourself in different ways along the same lines, even though we're talking about candy and chocolate, um, eventually can become something we're just working on the structure of it, right?
Right.
We're working on this is the exercise to go through, this is the structure to go through in your brain so that you can think of it for other topics, for other things.
And I see the advantage in talking about pumpkins or hot dogs or chocolate, because if we started focusing on dog training, certainly my knowledge of those things is really much more deep, and could cause me to get really into the weeds. And this allows me to, you know, I actually froze up for a second when you said pumpkins. I'm going, oh my goodness, what do I know about pumpkins? They're orange. What else do I know? Nothing. I know nothing else about pumpkins. But eventually I realized, well, I can tell lots of stories. There is plenty of things I can tell. So I see how this could be really, really helpful. But you know what? What I'd love to do is continue this conversation. And I'm going to, after we take a small break, I'm going to invite Juliana in to join the conversation. And I want to invite everybody who's watching that if you have questions, put them in the chat window, and Juliana will make sure to bring them forward if you have questions about public speaking or challenges that you might have. And I'd love to take this discussion just a little bit further if we could, Camilla. But let me just take a quick break, because we have a great sale going on right now at Karen Pryor Clicker Training. It's sort of what we call our back to school sale. The month of September, we often make this our back to school month. And for this month only, you can save up to 20% on Karen Pryor Academy online courses, training essentials, and streaming videos. And we don't often have sales like this. So it's really a great opportunity to stock up on some of our incredible offerings. And if you're not ready to start one of our online courses, you can buy it right now and then put it on hold and arrange to start it at a later date, but take advantage of the sale. And that's one of a lot of things that people aren't aware of, is that you can buy it now, put it on hold, and then just activate the course a little bit later once you're ready to actually start. And make sure to head over to our online store to stock up on things like clicker rings, clickers, our on-cue training treats, which are really, really great treats for dogs and cats, and lots of other things. In addition to up to 20% off, we're offering free shipping on orders of $59 or more. So for more information, for more details, just go to our website, clickertraining.com. So make sure to do that. And having said all of that, let's bring Camilla back and bring Juliana back. Because Juliana, you and I were talking about the fact that getting up in front of a bunch of people isn't necessarily easy. I, as a kid, had huge fears of getting up in front of people. And I think, Camilla, the way you approached approximating me talking about pumpkins, I think was a great way. I really loved that. You threw me for a loop, because when we talked about it originally, it was about apples. But I'm glad you threw me for a loop, because that's exactly what I think we have to be comfortable is talk about X. And you're going, what do I know about X? Didn't you find that a useful tool? I mean, I'm assuming you might have, Juliana. What did you think about that?
So what's been in my brain this whole conversation is social media. And I'm glad to see so many positive reinforcement trainers here, because what a great way to come up with a topic you want to talk about, how to organize it, get yourself in front of a camera and say concise, compelling information about any of the bazillion topics that we could talk about positive reinforcement. And I think we so need that. And people get the jitters about, I think it's a little bit getting in front of the camera, but I think a lot of it is, what are they going to say? And how do they say it to make sure it's compelling and all of that? Sorry about that. Lola's chiming in.
But I think the thing that you pointed out, Camilla, is that we don't necessarily have to come up with this finished product right away. One of the ways is to approximate it by just, what do you know about pumpkins? I mean, and a big part of it is getting over that fear of saying, I'm going to get up in front of a bunch of people and do this.
Yeah, so just taking something inert like pumpkins, like apples, is really just a way to take the pressure off, right? You're not talking about dog training, you're not talking about all these things that have lots of implications or is super complicated. I just want 3 things about one topic that, coffee, pumpkin spice lattes, whatever it is. It's just something that you can pull 3 details, any little details. And Ken, you gave me so much to work with. But even just the start of just like pumpkins are orange, they're large, they're plants, or they're
Right.
vegetable. That could be enough to jump off of. Um, Very famously, sometimes I'll give doorknob. How and you're like, doorknob? How can you think like 3 things about doorknobs? But they give you access to another room. They are usually made of metal, and sometimes they have locks. There you go. There's 3 things about doorknobs. So I just encourage everyone to just you can play that game while you're sitting in traffic. You can play that game while you're doing your laundry. Just 3 things about whatever it is that's you look around the room and find something. And it just helps you kind of just get over the fear of oh my gosh, I've got all this pressure or all this complexity to spell out for people. And instead it's just 3 things about this thing that doesn't really matter in the big scheme of it.
Right. And that probably was the thing that made it easier for me to come up with it. I love the fact you said, let's not do anything related to training in dogs necessarily. Let's just take a random topic that you think you don't know very much about, but yet we created a story and a speech about it. And before I knew it, I had lots of things to say about pumpkins and I just completely forgotten about it. I'm going to take this minute. Someone said pictures, and I was just scrolling through the Instagram just so that people can see it. I don't know. There's the picture of me working my dogs with a pumpkin head on. I don't even know if you can see it very well.
Yeah.
We can.
That's amazing.
It's great.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I did.
Thank you for that.
So what other questions do you have, Juliana? I mean, about public speaking that you might want to bring forward? If there haven't been any questions from our viewers, what kinds of things would you want to ask Camilla about?
We have a few questions from the viewers.
Oh, okay.
So I will go ahead and start with that. The Doghouse Rules is asking, do you have different approaches and techniques for speaking to an audience of peers as opposed to the general public?
That is an excellent question, and it's a perfect segue because in the latter parts of practicing for speeches and practicing your stories, the audience is kind of the key, right? So the audience really matters as far as how you're going to deliver or what you're going to deliver. And so if you think of 3 things like Ken, you were talking about fall. To me, I'm already thinking about what are the audiences that this would be really good for. So instead of thinking of like we need to tailor our speeches to our audiences. At the beginning, I want people to actually start thinking the other way. So, what kinds of audiences would these speeches be really appropriate for? So Ken, your speech about fall, I was actually thinking someone who's never lived in a place that has that kind of climate where the temperature gets colder, the leaves start falling. Um, if you had a room full of people who are new to this climate, they would really appreciate a speech like that, right? They would really appreciate the information about well, when the temperature starts dropping, the leaves start falling, then this is what that means. So yes, there's different techniques or there's a different approach, I suppose, to different audiences. And I would say I prefer when you tailor your talk to your audience instead of just kind of giving the same talk no matter the audience.
And how do you go? I guess the question I would have is, how do you think about that when you're thinking about whether it's a group of peers, for example, really experienced trainers who you're talking to, as opposed to the general public who knows very little about training? How do you decide it? How do you simplify? How do you make it easier? Is there a technique for doing that?
I would say that for the general public, you might need to get some data as far as what is the expectations of the general public
Right.
versus what are the expectations of a group of your peers. Is it a group of peers? There are different kinds of group of peers. There are different kinds of general public. Your sporting dog group of class is very different than your puppy class, very different than your reactive dog class. So it depends.
Sure. Sure. All right, good. Excellent. What other questions do we have, Juliana?
So Shelby is asking, do you have tips for talking too fast and using lots of filler words?
Hi, Shelby. Okay, so I blame Gilmore Girls for talking too fast. I also I'm someone who also talks too fast, and I blame Gilmore Girls because their scripts were so word heavy and they had to get through them so fast that to me that created a whole generation of people who talk really fast. Um, I would say to practice, and this is something of my own creation. I get my students to practice a very specific piece of prose and use a stopwatch. So if you get a piece of prose and say you're going to read one paragraph and you're going to time how long you're reading that paragraph. And then your whole goal is to practice slowing down. Because what I found with teaching a lot of my students is you would say slow down, slow down, slow down. But there was no quantifiable way for them to actually see that or to tell whether or not they are slowing down. So having a stopwatch and cutting the pieces instead of saying like this whole essay you're going to tell me out loud and we're going to time the whole thing, cutting it up into little pieces and being able to see like, oh, so this paragraph took me, 46 seconds. Let's see if I can make it 49 seconds. Let's see if I can make it 50 seconds. And then it's a lot of like the internal part of, okay, well, what felt different about the time when I did it 50 seconds instead of 46 seconds? So practice.
Now, that's a really good. I like that a lot because it does give you that quantifiable way. If I read a paragraph, it doesn't matter what, and I finish it in, like you said, 45 seconds, and I give myself the changing it from a 45 seconds to a minute is huge. That's a lot of slowing down that has to happen, and it would force me to really think about taking longer breaks between sentences, maybe emphasizing certain words. Yeah, I can really see where that would be a helpful tool by giving yourself a time and having to stretch it out to fill it. I can see that would certainly help me a lot. That's a great idea. Excellent. What else, Juliana? Do we have other questions?
So Nofar is asking, do you have tips for body language? I either move too much or freeze.
Well, you're getting.
Can I ask you a follow-up question to that? And do you think body language, I mean, it's certainly important, but I'm going to give you two examples of speakers that I admire a lot who have totally different body language. You have someone like Kathy Sadeo, who never stops moving, and she just moves her hands and she talks, and she's very big and broad with her movements, and she's very enjoyable. And then you have Dr. Susan Friedman, who stands behind a podium, never moves, and her voice is very measured and very, very calm. But she also keeps your attention, and she's very riveting and very grabs your attention. And so it can't be just about the body language, because clearly those are two opposite approaches to public speaking, and both are very likable, very well, people enjoy their speaking. So I'm adding to the question that Nofar asked, is it important? It must be important, but clearly there's differences that are both enjoyable.
Yes. So I would say it's very important, and I would say it comes down to style. Right? It's the important part of speaking is that you can convey the information. So whether you have a very animated speaker or you have someone who's very still, you have lots of different skills to be able to use or pull from, whether or not, body language is just one part of that the set of skills, the toolbox. You can pull from this, you can pull from that. And to me, I would say it would depend mostly upon your audience. So if you are super animated and you can feel that room start to get super charged up and you think it's going to bubble over, you might want to try and take it down a notch. Um, and that's getting to the finer points as far as it's very audience dependent. You can, and once you start practicing and seeing that, you can actually start to tailor your own body language for the audience that you have, right? Even if it's a class of 5 people, if you notice the dogs are all getting really amped up and really excited, you're probably not going to get them to do a fast moving exercise next. Same thing with your speaking. You might try and calm your speaking down, calm your movements down, and to be able to bring the level of energy kind of back down to calm the whole room down. It's very similar, whether it's, a room of 200 people or if it's going to be a room of 5 to 10 dogs.
That's interesting. One of the things that, well, let me see if there's any other questions, and then I have a comment that I want to make. I'll check in with Juliana first.
Anna has a question. Do you have students watch their video to critique and learn, or does that make people too nervous or self-critical?
That's a great question. My students, after a certain amount of time, we will watch video and we will practice video and we will actually swap videos so that they can practice critiquing other students as well. But I don't do that right off the bat. I definitely don't do it because there's so many other things that come into play, just the nervousness of talking in front of a camera, um, and the nervousness of like now they're thinking of like, oh my gosh, someone else is going to be watching this. So I wouldn't start with that, but it's definitely a great tool. And because of so much of our lives, like you were mentioning, Juliana, with social media, being in front of a camera, that's definitely a skill I teach because it's generally very useful.
Well, that's good. I can see where maybe putting your students watching themselves too early can backfire if they're just hate watching themselves, as many people do. It can make them horrified by what they look like or what they sound like, because we never, you know, we never see ourselves except when we're in a mirror, when we're actually holding ourselves in a specific way, and seeing ourselves on video can be a horrifying experience. One of the questions I had was, and I'm curious if if you find this to be a helpful technique, or it's just something that's useful for me. I know that for me, particularly when I'm speaking to a group of people that I'm really nervous about, I find myself looking out into the audience and I find this one friendly face who tends to nod and agree with me all the time, and that they sort of keep me centered. Okay, I'm on the right track. I'll keep looking at that friendly person who's obviously on my side. Is that a technique that can backfire on you, or is that a helpful technique generally?
It's interesting. I just saw an article about someone who really they actually express appreciation for I think it was a teacher who was expressing appreciation for the students in their class that would nod and kind of like listen and nod appropriately or laugh at their jokes and stuff during their talk. And I feel like as audience members, that's like something great for us to take note of is to react and to kind of go along with the speaker. But as far as a speaker goes, whatever you need to get you through the talking and the speaking part of it, I would say do that, right? I would put for some of my students, it's about spreading some of that eye contact around. So we have specific exercises to really help you do that because you want to make sure that your entire audience feels like they are part of this presentation. But if you are, really nervous, then you need to do whatever you need to do in order to succeed. So
Well, that's a good point. Well, Camilla, this has been really helpful, as I'm always surprised at how quickly the time flies by. And here we are at the end of the hour, and we had plenty of questions. And so obviously there's an interest in the topic. And I appreciate you taking the time to share these helpful tips and tricks with everybody. And I really enjoyed going through that process of thinking about a topic, thinking about a topic and just looking at putting it together into some kind of a speech. So thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we can have you back at some other time, and maybe we'll talk training or we'll talk more about public speaking, particularly if we see that there's a real interest in it. So I thank you for that. But before everybody goes, I do want to take a few moments to talk about what's coming up. In what month are we in? We're in October. We're going to be in October next month. So this is September. So in the month of October, my guests are going to be Mara Velez and Fernando Diaz. Both of them are going to be talking separately about different aspects of work in the shelter program. Mara Velez, of course, is with the Shelter Playgroup Alliance, and Fernando Diaz is with San Diego Humane Society. And I think it will be great for us to be able to talk about life in the shelter and what kinds of new programs are being developed for the shelter. So that's going to be at 1 p.m. Pacific time on October 5th. So I hope you'll join me then. I also want to remind you that if you have ideas, suggestions, questions, thoughts about future guest speakers, videos of good training that you want to share with our viewers, don't hesitate to visit our website, theranch.clickertraining.com. There is a place there for you to submit your feedback about the Ranch broadcast. We'd love to hear from you if you have suggestions or thoughts for us. And finally, we do want to remind you of the various offers that we shared with everybody today. We always have wonderful things happening at Karen Pryor Clicker Training. Most important is our conference, our Clicker Expo conference, both virtual in January and in person in Portland in April. Our back to school sale is up and running, and that just takes place during the month of September. A great opportunity to save up to 20%. And finally, a reminder for all of you interested in potentially becoming a professional dog trainer with the Karen Pryor Academy, you can go to our KarenPryorAcademy.com website and find out more about those programs. We really appreciate all of you joining us today here on Live from the Ranch, and I hope to see you next month. Take care. Happy training. Bye-bye.